Доброго ранку, шановні пані та панове. Ми розпочинаємо роботу Українського кризового медіа-центру. І зараз ми заслухаємо презентацію нової доповіді моніторингової місії ООН з прав людини в Україні, пані Фіону Фрейзер, голову моніторингової місії ООН з прав людини в Україні.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for coming this morning. This year is significant for Ukraine, and it is also significant for us. It was in February 2014, 5 years ago, following the Maidan events, that the government invited the United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. We started operating in March that year in different parts of the country, including in territory that the government does not now control. We thank the government for inviting us to help address systemic human rights violations. 2019 marks 5 years since the Russian Federation occupied the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol of Ukraine. And 5 years ago, the armed conflict started in eastern Ukraine. Talking to people is one of the key parts of our work and an important source of information. Today, I would like you to meet some of these people: victims, witnesses, journalists, human rights defenders. Bringing their testimonies to you is the commitment that we made 5 years ago, which we continue to keep to this day.
Да, вы там уже хоть сильно страшное, не то, не показывайте.
Да, говорите правду, пускай знает наше правительство, вот эти, которые баллотируются на этом, что как живем мы тут, в прифронтовой зоне.
This report, the 25th,
Після того, як Асіїв потрапив в полон,
This report, the 25th report of the UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission, covers the period from the 16th of November 2018 to the 15th of February 2019. Within these months, as well as over the past 5 years, the armed conflict has affected Ukrainians throughout the country and has had a direct impact on the lives of more than 5 million people, including those living in isolated villages on both sides of the contact line and over 1.3 million internally displaced persons. Men, women, boys and girls trapped in the conflict zone continue to suffer, lose their lives, their childhood, health, property and jobs. Their hope is not lost though. 5 years on, they long for peace.
Перемирие самое радостное, когда тихо перемирие. А грустное, когда в хату залетают снаряды и так далее, осколки. Вот это самое грустное. И когда страх постоянно, неописуемый. Такое вот.
Сейчас как стреляют, я уже напуганная, все. Я вот там один... Стрелять. Я выскочила на улицу, у сарай побегла, там посидела, вроде чуть немножко, оно как бак, оно вот это вот у меня все трясется. Мы пусть голые боссы останутся, пусть я это, ну чтоб не стреляли, чтоб не было войны. Не было войны, чтоб я своих внуков, чтоб сын с Киева приехал, чтоб я на старости лет... Пока идти меня в могилу, я хоть бы с ними поговорили, и все.
This reporting period from mid-November 2018 to mid-February 2019 saw the lowest number of civilian casualties for the entire conflict. A man and a woman were killed, and 11 men and 3 women were injured. In 2018, we recorded 279 civilian casualties, of which 55 were killed and 224 injured. This is half the number of the civilian casualties in 2017 and the lowest annual civilian casualty figures for the entire conflict period. Let us remember, though, in total, over 3,000 civilians have been killed since the start of the conflict and up to 9,000 civilians injured. Regrettably, since the 15th of February, we have noted an uptick in civilian casualties, resulting from shelling, small arms and light weapons, as well as from mine-related incidents. We therefore welcome the recent recommitment to the ceasefire on the occasion of the 8th of March International Women's Day, and we call on all parties to respect it. I would like to mention a recent incident that illustrates how fragile the situation is in the conflict zone. On the 1st of March, 15 civilians in the villages of Travnievne, Holodosove, including a 6-year-old child, were walking to catch a social bus. They were heading for Bakhmut, a nearby town. When shelling started, people fell and spent 30 minutes lying on the ground. Bullets were landing 3 meters from them. It is the parties to the conflict who can stop the hostilities and bring civilian casualty figures to zero by upholding the ceasefire and simply by not shelling civilian areas. Also, there should be a state policy on compensation and reparation for those who have lost relatives, for those who have been injured, for those whose property has been destroyed or damaged. Such policy does not exist now, and it would be an essential element for fostering future peace and reconciliation. The conflict divides communities and tears families apart.
Да, дети у нас живут за линией разграничения, не можем общаться нормально. А ехать туда, это тяжело, тем более жена в таком состоянии сейчас, что в году, допустим, 3 раза если съездим, то хорошо. Там внуки есть уже, там дети, внуки, хочется и помочь чем-то, и, общаться не можем.
Complex and at times humiliating procedures to cross the contact line aggravate the separation of communities. What used to be, for many, a 30-minute car ride is now an arduous journey. As we have seen this winter, such journeys can last hours, out in the cold, snow, and on icy roads. At least 11 people have died while crossing the contact line since the beginning of the year, reportedly due to health conditions. Such a journey is often dangerous. People drive and walk inches away from minefields. On the 23rd of February this year, a minivan carrying civilians hit a mine when it drove to the side of a road close to the Olenivka checkpoint in territory controlled by the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. As a result, a man and a woman were killed and another man was seriously injured. We believe that all parties should do more so that civilians can cross the contact line faster and without endangering their lives. It is essential to keep the connection between people living on both sides. More than 700,000 pensioners with resident registration in territory controlled by the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic and the self-proclaimed Lugansk People's Republic lost access to their pensions at some point from 2014 up until now. This is a direct consequence of the state policy linking the right to pension to that of IDP registration and then of verification requirements stemming from this linkage. Our recommendation remains the same. Access to pension should be immediately delinked from IDP registration, and people should have equal access to their pension regardless of their place of residence. These people have paid into the system all their lives. They believed in the system, and now they cannot receive what they are due. The United Nations Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine continued its work in territory controlled by the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic and the self-proclaimed Lugansk People's Republic, despite restrictions to its activities. Some of our key concerns regarding the human rights situation across the contact line are as follows. Civilians remain subject to arbitrary decisions and structures imposed outside of Ukraine's legal and institutional framework. Systemic human rights abuses persist, such as the practice of a 30-day detention of individual that amounts to arbitrary incommunicado detention. We reiterate the need for regular, unimpeded and confidential access to detainees for international observers as an essential safeguard. Civic space remains highly restricted in territory controlled by the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic and the self-proclaimed Lugansk People's Republic. People cannot fully exercise their right to freedom of opinion and expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, association, as well as freedom of religion or belief. I invite you now to listen to a Baptist priest and a Radio Liberty journalist who speak about civic space across the contact line. The journalist mentions the case of Stanislav Asiev, Ukrainian correspondent who was detained in Donetsk in June 2017 and remains there deprived of his liberty.
Після того, як Асєєв потрапив в полон, на території непідконтрольній взагалі немає журналістів українських, які б працювали для українських видань, передавали звідти інформацію. Звісно, ми співпрацюємо з людьми, які знаходяться на непідконтрольній території, але, по-перше, ці люди наражаються на велику небезпеку і вони не можуть працювати відкрито. Якраз же випадок Асєєва показує те, що ці люди, всі, які цим займаються, можуть бути звинувачені в шпигунстві.
Навіть в цьому році, ось декілька тижнів тому, в одній з луганських церков самого міста Луганська був проведений обшук з облавою. Прийшли озброєні люди в камуфляжі, зупинили богослужіння, переписали людей, які відповідають за це зібрання, ось, припинили це зібрання. Треба розуміти, що такої можливості разом зібратися і помолитися в протестантських церквах на окупованих територіях немає.
In this reporting period, we documented 172 human rights violations involving unlawful or arbitrary detention, torture and ill treatment, committed on both sides of the contact line. 91 of them occurred during the reporting period. Lack of effective investigations and prosecution of perpetrators in such cases persist. These violations stem from critical systemic issues that must be addressed. We urge parties to cease the practice of arbitrary arrest, torture, and ill treatment. We welcome the resumption of transferring pre-conflict prisoners from territory controlled by the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic, and the first two such transfers from territory controlled by the self-proclaimed Lugansk People's Republic. We hope that this process will continue as there are more pre-conflict prisoners who seek to be transferred to be closer to their relatives. During this reporting period, we documented 89 violations of the right to a fair trial. These include the use of pressure to obtain confessions and plea bargains. Protracted trials are a systemic issue in Ukraine. Currently, the situation is exacerbated by the lack of judges. As a result, detainees facing conflict-related charges such as terrorism or trespassing on territorial integrity of Ukraine can spend up to several years in pretrial custody. 5 years after the killing of 98 people at Maidan and the violence in Odessa on the 2nd of May 2014 that led to 48 deaths, we note no meaningful progress in the investigations and prosecution of perpetrators. In Crimea, temporarily occupied by the Russian Federation, we continue to document violations of human rights and international humanitarian law. The key patterns of abuses identified during this reporting period are the following. First, intimidation of human rights defenders, for example, a prominent defense lawyer, Emil Kubedinov, who faced pressure from occupying authorities. There was an attempt to deprive him of the right to practice as a defense lawyer. We will now show you a video of two human rights defenders, Emil Kubedinov, who I've just mentioned, as well as Olga Skripnik.
С первых дней мы столкнулись с преследованием крымских татар, с первых дней мы столкнулись с преследованием людей за их убеждения, да, за их какие-то мысли, за слова и так далее. И это, конечно, для меня лично было очень серьезным таким посылом для того, чтобы начать защищать этих людей. 17-й год, январь, когда меня арестовали на 10 суток, декабрь 2018 года, вот в декабре 2018 года меня арестовали на 5 суток, и буквально вот в этом месяце была попытка исключить меня из коллегии адвокатской и лишить меня статуса. Я мечтаю увидеть моих подзащитных вне этих клеток и вне тюрем, как и семьи, наверное. Я мечтаю их обнять и увидеться их вот вне этих тюрем, вне этих клеток. Да, об этом ми мечтаємо кожен день.
Ми працюємо для того, щоб люди в окупації хоча б мали шанс на те, щоб бути захищеними, щоб їх права людини були захищені і в першу чергу, щоб вони відчували людську гідність, яка так важлива в цей період. Також ми працюємо для того, щоб винні були притягнуті до відповідальності. Але для нас, як правозахисників, і для мене особисто важливо, щоб це не було помстою України, да, людям, які залишились в окупації, а щоб саме це було відновлення справедливості. Якщо говорити про мене як людину звичайну, то я донька, і в мене є мама, яка залишилась в Криму. І, безумовно, я мрію про те, щоб побачити і бути разом з нею.
Russian Federation authorities continue to stifle the expression of critical opinion and opposition to Crimea's occupation. Third, Crimean Tatars remain disproportionately affected by certain human rights violations. We continue to observe the use of criminal convictions of Crimean Tatars for alleged membership in religious Muslim groups banned in the Russian Federation. Fourth, Russian Federation authorities continue the military conscription of Crimean residents into its armed forces. Men evading the military drafts may be subject to criminal prosecution punishable by up to 2 years in prison. In 2018, at least 21 persons were found guilty of this, according to the Russian Federation official data. We have analysed the outcomes of the naval incident near the Kerch Strait. The report sets out that 24 Ukrainian detained crew members currently held in Moscow should be granted protection under international humanitarian law. It means they must be humanely treated, protected against violence or intimidation, and receive medical assistance. In less than a month, Ukraine will be electing a president. We urge all those involved in the electoral process to ensure peaceful and inclusive elections. This is possible in an environment where all people can fully exercise their right to freedom of expression, to freedom of peaceful assembly, and to association. To bring more light to the current situation with civic space and fundamental freedoms in Ukraine, we have published today a separate report on civic space and fundamental freedoms in Ukraine ahead of presidential, parliamentary, and local elections. The report covers the period from 1st of January 2018 to the 15th of January 2019, during which we documented 164 violations of the rights to fundamental freedoms in Ukraine. In at least 34 incidents, perpetrators were directly linked or affiliated with extreme right-wing groups. Providing an overview of trends that had a negative effect on the exercise of fundamental freedoms in Ukraine, the report also details emblematic cases that range from spraying acid on victims to gun injuries that caused the death of 2 activists. Impunity prevails in most of the documented cases. We note the efforts of the government to ensure investigations into high-profile cases, but we call on the authorities to do more to bring all perpetrators to account, including by properly qualifying the crimes and taking into account criminal motives, instead of only seeing them as acts of hooliganism. In conclusion, the recommendations of this report and all the quarterly reports of the High Commissioner for Human Rights that have been released to date serve as a roadmap for reforms, peaceful resolution of the conflict, and ensuring justice for all in Ukraine. We are here to support the government of Ukraine in all these endeavours. Thank you.